Picture entering a chamber where every countenance suggests you do not belong, where every whisper questions your value, and your most significant rival just undermined you. Yet you still depart with the trophy in your grasp. This is not a cinematic script. It is a true-to-life, inspired narrative about how one young woman from Louisiana astonished the entire Ivy League, exposed a deception, and redefined the principles of belonging at a prestigious university. Remain until the conclusion, for the manner in which she overturned the circumstances on everyone is something you will never forget. And hey, before we delve in, if you appreciate tales of endurance, underdogs, and moments that disrupt the established order, hit that subscribe button and assist us in reaching our initial 1,000 subscribers. Your backing ensures these powerful narratives continue to arrive week after week. Who permitted your entry here? The inquiry sliced through the room like a blade, dripping with both sarcasm and disdain. The voice belonged to Arthur Kensington III, the quintessential golden boy of the elite university's National Oratory Invitational. Tall, poised, and clad in a tailored navy blazer, he was every inch the prestigious institution's ideal representative. His smirk widened as he surveyed the young woman standing awkwardly at the rear of the lecture hall. Now, envision this. A nationwide competition had gathered the country's most brilliant young debaters at Central University. Among polished private school attendees from affluent districts, the suburbs of metropolitan areas, and the preparatory schools of the Northeast, stood Lena Harper. 17 years old, from the inner city of Louisiana. Her athletic shoes were scuffed, her blazer was second-hand, and her accent, a slow, melodic southern drawl, had already prompted many in the room to decide to ridicule her. She clutched her faded notebook to her chest as murmurs darted like arrows across the room. Is she even on the roster? Did admissions make an error? I assumed this was an invitational, not an open mic session. Lena heard every word, but she maintained her gaze steady on the front stage where the event coordinator, Professor Eleanor Vance, stood arranging the speaker schedule. Professor Vance, renowned for her sharp critiques and her famously impossible-to-impress demeanor, surveyed the room with practiced indifference. Her eyes briefly flickered toward Lena, pausing just long enough to register her presence, and perhaps her perceived lack of esteemed background. The first day was intended for icebreakers and warm-up rounds. Students mingled, forming informal practice groups. Names were being exchanged, resumes compared like battle scars from academic conflicts long concluded. Lena stood alone by the window, tracing the worn edges of her debate journal. Every page was filled with handwritten speeches, rebuttal techniques, and late-night notes her mother had helped her draft after long shifts at the diner. Her mother's words resonated in her head even now. You don't have to outdress them, child. Just outthink them. Suddenly, Arthur's voice boomed again. Hey, Professor, are we accepting community volunteers this year? He laughed, eliciting chuckles from his inner circle. Lena inhaled deeply, combating the flush creeping up her neck. Before she could respond, Professor Vance's voice cut through the laughter. That's enough, Mr. Kensington. The room fell silent. A few heads turned, eyebrows raised. Arthur gave a theatrical bow, feigning chastisement, but the damage had been done. Lena's face burned, but her spine remained straight. Later that afternoon, in the main lecture hall, Professor Vance began outlining the first debate topic for tomorrow's elimination round. Resolved. The role of socioeconomic background in university admissions should be minimized. The irony was not lost on Lena. Her heart pounded as she scribbled notes furiously. Every word, every argument that came to mind felt personal because she wasn't just debating a topic. She was debating her right to even stand in that room. After the session, students gathered in study groups, but no one invited Lena. She found an unoccupied corner in the library, opened her battered laptop, and began to research Supreme Court rulings, socioeconomic statistics, historic university admission biases. She absorbed it all. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. Lena, you possess this child. Make him heed. Lena smiled faintly, closed the message, and returned to work. Somewhere deep inside, a quiet resolve hardened. The morning of the first elimination round arrived, cold and gray. The university's debate hall, with its tall Gothic arches and rows of polished mahogany benches, felt more like a courtroom than a classroom. Lena stood at the side entrance, peeking in as the audience filed to their seats. Students, professors, and even a few journalists covering the invitational. The air buzzed with nervous energy and thinly veiled competition. Her name was listed dead last on the speaker roster, a position she knew all too well, reserved for afterthoughts and those considered unworthy of attention. She tightened her ponytail, adjusted the collar of her thrift store blazer, and stepped inside. Arthur Kensington, of course, was slated first. He took the stage like he owned it. His voice boomed, his diction flawless. He wove statistics with personal anecdotes, punctuating arguments with calculated pauses that drew nods and light applause from the audience. When Arthur finished, the judges scribbled notes with smiles barely concealed behind their pens. The next few speakers followed, polished, confident, speaking with the practiced tone of students who'd spent years on the national circuit. Lena listened carefully to each, mentally noting flaws, gaps, and weak assumptions. But with every passing speech, a knot tightened in her stomach. Then came her turn. Her name echoed awkwardly through the hall. Next speaker, Lena Harper, representing Louisiana's Southeast Regional Forum. A beat of uncomfortable silence followed. Lena rose slowly. Every step toward the podium felt heavier than the last. She passed rows of students whispering into each other's ears. Some smiled, amused. Others just stared, waiting for her to crumble. Professor Vance sat at the judges' table, eyes fixed, unreadable. Lena placed her notebook on the podium, her fingers trembling only slightly. She adjusted the microphone, cleared her throat, and then she began. Her opening line was soft but intentional. Before I commence, I would like to express my gratitude to this esteemed institution for this invitation. Even if some individuals in this chamber believe I should not be present. The ripple of gasps and awkward laughter was immediate. She didn't pause. With deliberate clarity, she launched into her argument. She didn't possess the polished oratorical tricks Arthur flaunted, but she had something else. Raw conviction. She spoke of systemic bias, of communities like hers where schools barely had functioning air conditioning, let alone debate programs. She quoted Supreme Court rulings, referenced longitudinal studies on socioeconomic impact on educational outcomes, and without warning, shifted into personal narrative. Some of us were not born with legacy admission papers awaiting us, she stated, locking eyes with Arthur mid-sentence. Some of us had to earn every single invitation, including this very one. There was no applause yet, just a charged silence, the kind that demanded attention. When she reached her closing, reducing the impact of socio-economic background in admissions isn't about charity. It's about fairness. It's about potential. And it's about ensuring the next Lena Harper doesn't have to stand here proving she deserves a seat at a table she's already earned. Her voice didn't waver once. As she stepped down, the room stayed silent for a breath longer than necessary. Then scattered applause. Not overwhelming, but real. Arthur smirked sarcastically as she passed by him, muttering under his breath, "Charming speech. Let's see if it matters." But Lena didn't respond. She walked straight past him, shoulders back, head high, because deep down, she knew something had shifted. Later that afternoon, the preliminary scores were posted on the announcement board outside the debate hall. Lena approached cautiously, her heart thumping in her chest. The rankings were neatly typed, with the top 16 names advancing to the next round. Each name felt like a wall she'd need to climb. She scanned the list, her eyes darting frantically until they landed on hers. Lena Harper, rank 12, just above the cutoff. A slow breath escaped her lips. Relief mingled with adrenaline. She wasn't at the pinnacle, but she wasn't eliminated either. She had survived the first culling. Behind her, Arthur's unmistakable voice rang out. "Well, behold that," he drawled, standing with two of his debate circle friends. "Miraclis truli do transpiri." Lena didn't turn around. She knew better. As she walked away, she overheard more whispers. "Who is she again? She's from some public school in Louisiana, I think. This must be a diversity selection. No way. She actually scored higher than Alex or Priya. Lena's stomach tightened, but again, she kept moving. That evening, in her tiny dorm room assigned for out-of-state participants, she sprawled her research notes across the bed. The topic for the next round had just been emailed. Resolved. Affirmative action policies create more detriment than benefit. The irony tasted bitter. They were going to compel her to defend or challenge the very policy that might have been the sole reason she'd received this invitation in the first place, at least in their perception. For a few minutes, she just stared at her laptop screen. Her mind flooded with doubts. What if they were correct? What if she was only here because of some bureaucratic checkbox? What if her next speech was her last? Her phone buzzed. Her mother. Recall, child. You have never required anyone's permission to be exceptional. Lena smiled faintly. With renewed determination, she opened a dozen research tabs at once. Supreme Court rulings on affirmative action, longitudinal studies on underrepresented student performance, personal testimonies from students like her. And then she went a step further. She started outlining arguments for both sides. If they wished to trap her, she'd ensure she understood every possible escape route. The subsequent day, the debate hall felt even colder. Arthur was again scheduled before her. He took the floor with a smug grin, delivering a performance that blended selectively chosen statistics with carefully veiled sarcasm. We should admit students based on merit, he declared at one point, turning briefly toward Lena's section in the audience. Not on compassion or social engineering. The audience chuckled politely. The judges smiled, jotting notes. By the time Lena's name was called, the air was thick with expectation and skepticism. She rose, walked steadily to the podium, and began. Her voice was calm but unwavering. This discussion is not about lowering standards, she stated, locking eyes with the audience. It is about acknowledging that the playing field has not been level for a very long duration. She didn't stop there. She cited historical data on legacy admissions, the percentage of the university student body that originated from families in the top 1% income bracket, the unseen advantages embedded into the system long before students ever completed an application. And then she paused. If you believe that only grades and test scores should determine worth, she continued, then ask yourselves, how many of you seated here today would be present without private tutors, elite preparatory schools, and parents who comprehended how to manipulate the system before you could even spell university? The room shifted uncomfortably. Some jaws tightened. A few students exchanged glances. Arthur's confident smirk began to waver. Lena concluded with quiet intensity. Leveling the playing field isn't about granting anyone an unearned advantage. It's about ensuring the next generation of thinkers and leaders doesn't look precisely like the last. When she stepped down, the applause came quicker this time, louder. Not overwhelming, but undeniable. Professor Vance's eyes followed her as she returned to her seat. For the first time, there was something different in her gaze. Not indifference, but recognition. The next day, Lena's name appeared on the quarterfinal bracket. She had climbed higher than anyone expected. Rank 5 now. Arthur still sitting comfortably at number 1. But this time something felt amiss. On her way to the dining hall, Lena noticed 2 students from Arthur's debate circle huddled near the bulletin board, laughing quietly while glancing at her. As she walked past, one muttered under his breath, just loud enough for her to hear, "Let's see how she manages tomorrow's subject." Her stomach twisted. That evening, as she prepared for the quarterfinals, an email popped up in her inbox. Subject: Revised topic assignment, urgent, from debate.committee@university.edu. The email appeared official enough. Due to scheduling conflicts, your debate topic has been switched. Please prepare to argue the following resolution tomorrow. Resolved. The nation's education system rewards conformity over creativity. Failure to comply will result in disqualification. Panic surged. She scrolled back through the earlier official schedule. Nothing mentioned this alteration. None of the other competitors had reported any topic shifts. Her instincts screamed something wasn't right, But she didn't have time to question it. With barely 10 hours before her round, she shoved aside her previous preparation and started anew, researching, writing, rehearsing. By 2 a.m., her eyes burned, but her speech was completed. She fell asleep with her laptop still open. The next morning, walking into the debate hall, she clutched her speech notes tightly. But as she approached the check-in table, Professor Vance called her name. "Miss Harper, where have you been?" The professor's tone was sharp, almost annoyed. Lena blinked, confused. I've been preparing for the topic change." The email stated. Professor Vance's lips thinned as she scanned the sender's address. "This is not from us," she said coldly. "This is fraudulent." Lena's heart sank. Her hands trembled. Who would? Before she could finish, Professor Vance cut her off. "You were supposed to prepare for the assigned topic. Resolved? Technology has eroded authentic human communication, and your round commences in 5 minutes." Lena's stomach dropped. No preparation, no research, no outline. Arthur, standing nearby, caught her eye. His smirk was unmistakable. He tilted his head slightly, mouthing silently across the room. "Oops." Lena's throat tightened. She had 2 options. Walk out or walk up. Her mother's voice rose in her memory, steady and unyielding. "You didn't come this far to yield now." Lena stood tall. With trembling but determined hands, she grabbed a blank notepad and a pen, sprinted to an empty corner, and began scribbling ideas at lightning speed. Technology, communication, erosion of authenticity. Okay, she could work with that. When her name was called, she walked to the podium, heart pounding so loudly she could barely hear anything else. For a moment, she closed her eyes, inhaled. Then she spoke. Her voice was shaky at first, but as she built momentum, clarity returned. She spoke from experience about how social media had distorted friendships back home, how screen addiction replaced genuine conversations at her school, how even here, students were more interested in fleeting trends than authentic dialogue. It wasn't her most thoroughly researched speech, but it was raw, real, and by the end, it was powerful. As she stepped down, Arthur's smile faded just a little. Professor Vance didn't clap, but her gaze lingered on Lena longer than it ever had. Back in her room that night, Lena stared at her phone. No new emails, no new threats. But she knew this wasn't over. There were games being played, and she'd just proven she could play too. The next morning, Lena sat on the stone steps outside the debate hall, sipping lukewarm coffee from a vending machine cup. The autumn air was crisp, but her mind was burning with questions. Who had sent that fake email, and why had no one officially addressed it? Her phone buzzed with a notification. Quarterfinal results posted. She walked briskly to the bulletin board, heart pounding. Lena Harper, rank 5, advancing to semifinals. A small gasp escaped her lips. Even after the sabotage, she had made it. A few heads turned at her reaction. Arthur stood nearby with his friends, jaw tightening ever so slightly when he saw her name on the list. That afternoon, while reviewing her notes in the library, a shadow fell across her desk. Lena looked up. Professor Vance. Without sitting, Professor Vance lowered her voice. "Miss Harper, I'd like to speak with you privately." Lena's heart skipped. They walked together to Professor Vance's small office down the hall. The walls were lined with debate trophies and framed photos from past university champions. Professor Vance motioned for her to sit. "I reviewed the email you received," she began. "It was spoofed." The sender masked their address to make it appear like an official university account. Lena felt her throat tighten. "Do you know who dispatched it?" Professor Vance's gaze narrowed. "Not yet, but I've informed the administration. And for now, maintain a low profile." Lena's fists clenched slightly on her lap. "I do not wish to maintain a low profile, Professor. Someone attempted to undermine me." Professor Vance leaned back, eyes unreadable. "I admire your spirit, but comprehend this place devours the reckless alive." There was a long pause. Finally, Professor Vance's voice softened just a fraction. "Advance to the finals. Then we will converse." With that, the meeting concluded. That night, Lena stayed up late in the dorm lounge, headphones on, blocking out the world. The semi-final topic had just been released. Resolved, social movements driven by digital activism are less effective than traditional grassroots organizing. Perfect. This was her domain. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, extracting data from case studies on global social movements, national protests, even local disaster relief efforts back home. Her personal connection to the subject burned through every note she typed. But even as she prepared, she couldn't shake the feeling that something else was approaching. The day of the semifinals arrived. Lena's opponent, Priya Sharma, ranked second, from a prestigious private academy in another state, with a debate resume longer than most people's college applications. As they faced each other on stage, Priya offered a polite smile, but there was no warmth behind it. The debate commenced. Priya opened strong. Calculated points, strategic takedowns, polished transitions. But when Lena took the microphone, she transformed the room. She spoke of lived experience, of witnessing online petitions translate into real-world policy changes in her own neighborhood, of how digital activism had become the only megaphone for marginalized voices. Her voice wavered only once when she mentioned the loss of her uncle during post-disaster recovery efforts and how online fundraisers had been the sole reason her family could rebuild. The room fell silent at that moment. By the end, even Priya seemed shaken. When the judges returned with their decision, the announcement rang out. The winner, advancing to the final round, Lena Harper. The applause was scattered, hesitant. But it didn't matter. She'd done it. From a forgotten name at the bottom of the list to a finalist at a prestigious university. But as Lena walked off stage, Professor Vance approached quietly, her face unreadable. "Be prepared," she said lowly. "The next round won't just test your skill." And just behind her, Arthur Kensington stood leaning against the wall, arms crossed, eyes narrowing, because in the final, it would be Lena versus Arthur, and both knew there was more at stake than a trophy. The morning of the final round dawned colder than any day before. Heavy gray clouds hung low over the campus as if the sky itself understood the weight of what was coming. The main auditorium was packed. Faculty, alumni, students, even a few regional reporters had shown up to cover the event. Cameras lined the back wall. The university's debate invitational wasn't usually this high profile, but word had spread quickly over the past week. The resilient young woman versus the university's prominent figure narrative was too compelling to disregard. Lena sat backstage, flipping through her notebook. Her heart thudded in her chest, but her breathing stayed even. Years of late-night speeches in her bedroom mirror had prepared her for this. Across the room, Arthur Kensington paced confidently. His friends clustered around him like groupies, offering high fives and last-minute pep talks. Lena caught snippets of his voice. "Easy victory. Just need to overwhelm her under cross-examination. She'll break. No way she's ready for this level." But she didn't flinch. Professor Vance approached her quietly. "You're about to step into a room that wasn't built for you," Professor Vance said, her voice low. "But make no mistake, you've earned every second of this stage." Lena nodded. The debate topic was already displayed on the main screen. Resolved, traditional institutions remain the best guardians of academic integrity. The irony was thick. Lena almost smiled. The auditorium fell silent as the moderator took the stage. "Welcome to the final round of the Elite University National Invitational. Representing the university's Honor Division, Arthur Kensington III. Representing the Southeast Regional Public Forum, Lena Harper." Applause erupted, but Lena couldn't help noticing Arthur's side of the room was louder. The moderator explained the rules. Each speaker would deliver an opening statement, followed by cross-examinations, rebuttals, and closing arguments. Arthur went first, and he came out swinging. He painted a picture of the university and other elite institutions as guardians of knowledge, traditions, and fairness. He referenced decades of academic research, surveys on institutional trust, even quoted a former Secretary of Education. His delivery was sharp, charismatic, and dripping with confidence. The audience absorbed it eagerly. When it was Lena's turn, she stepped forward slowly. Her palms tingled with adrenaline, but her voice was steady. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "we're here today to debate who gets to decide what's considered academic integrity." She paused, making eye contact with the judges, with the audience, with Arthur himself. "And I stand here as living proof that sometimes the very institutions we trust are the first to silence voices like mine." A visible ripple moved through the audience. She didn't stop. Lena spoke of the fake email sabotage without naming names, but making it clear that institutional gatekeeping wasn't just theoretical. It was happening right here, right now. She referenced historical examples. How universities once barred women, then people of color, then anyone who didn't fit a narrow mold of what qualified looked like. Her voice rose with conviction. Integrity isn't just about preserving traditions. It's about evolving past the ones that kept people out. Cross-examination followed. Arthur attacked aggressively. He questioned her statistics, pressed her on definitions, interrupted her points. But Lena stayed calm. For every jab, she countered with clarity. "You're shifting the argument, Mr. Kensington," she said at one point, voice cool. "Let's return to the resolution." The crowd stirred. Even some faculty members leaned forward, intrigued. In the rebuttal phase, Lena dismantled Arthur's core argument. "If traditional institutions were flawless guardians of integrity, I wouldn't have had to fight my way through sabotage just to stand here today." Her words hung in the air. For the first time all tournament, Arthur's confident facade cracked. His smile faded. His rebuttal came across rushed, defensive. When the debate concluded, the auditorium sat in charged silence. Then applause. This time it wasn't scattered. It was real, full, loud. Lena stepped back from the podium, breath shaking. Arthur stared at the floor, jaw tight, refusing to look at her. Professor Vance, standing near the judges' table, gave Lena the faintest nod. But the final decision hadn't been announced yet. Both debaters were escorted backstage to await the results. As Lena sat in the hallway, staring at her worn sneakers, one thought repeated in her mind. "Win or lose, I made them listen." Lena sat on the cold bench outside the auditorium, her hands trembling despite her best efforts to stay composed. The minutes dragged. From the hallway, she could faintly hear the muffled voices of the judges deliberating behind closed doors. Laughter erupted briefly, then silence, then more murmurs. Her stomach churned. Arthur paced a few feet away, arms crossed, eyes dark with frustration. His earlier cocky swagger was gone, replaced by a nervous tension he couldn't hide. Lena glanced at him, but he didn't meet her gaze. Finally, the door opened. Professor Vance stepped out, her face carefully neutral. "The results will be announced in 5 minutes, she said, motioning both students back inside. Lena's heart pounded in her chest as she re-entered the main auditorium. The crowd was buzzing now. Phones were out. Students whispered predictions to each other. Arthur's friends sat front row, wearing identical university blue sweaters. Lena's section almost empty, except for a few out-of-state competitors she'd befriended and a single camera crew from a local news outlet. The moderator took the stage, holding a sealed envelope. Lena held her breath. After much deliberation, the moderator began. "The judges have reached a decision." He opened the envelope slowly, with dramatic pause. "The winner of the 2025 Elite University National Invitational is..." A beat. "Lena Harper." The room froze. For one heart-stopping second, Lena wondered if she'd heard it wrong. Then applause erupted. Not just polite, obligatory clapping, but real, genuine applause from parts of the room she hadn't expected. Some students stood, others simply stared in disbelief. Arthur's face turned pale. He didn't wait for the official congratulations. Without a word, he grabbed his bag and stormed out through the side exit. Lena stood still, too shocked to move. Professor Vance approached, holding out her hand. Lena shook it, her fingers trembling. "Well done," Professor Vance said, voice low but sincere. "You didn't just win a debate. You proved you belong here." As cameras flashed and people surged forward to shake her hand, Lena's phone buzzed. A text from her mother. "Child, I told you. You never needed their permission to illuminate." Lena blinked back sudden tears. She took a deep breath, lifted her chin, and smiled for the first time in days. Wide, unguarded, and full of something that had been missing, pride. Later that evening, Lena sat alone on the steps outside the hall, the crisp night air wrapping around her like a familiar friend. A shadow approached. Professor Vance. "I thought you'd like to know," Professor Vance said quietly, sitting beside her. "The administration found out who dispatched that fraudulent email." Lena's breath caught. "Who?" Professor Vance's lips curled into something between satisfaction and regret. "Arthur Kensington." The evidence was undeniable. Lena's stomach flipped. "Is he?" she began. "Facing disciplinary review," Professor Vance finished. "Nothing public yet. The university protects its own. But, off the record, his chances at future national competitions are gone." Lena exhaled slowly. "I didn't wish it to conclude like this," she whispered. Professor Vance nodded. "I know. But you handled it with more grace than most adults I know." They sat there in silence for a moment longer, staring at the distant lights of the campus. The battle was over. But Lena knew her real journey was only just beginning, because for the first time, this prestigious university would remember her name. And for the first time, the young woman from Louisiana wasn't just fighting to be heard. She was here to stay. Weeks later, back in Louisiana, Lena sat on her front porch, sipping sweet tea as the sun set over the neighborhood. Her mother stepped outside, holding an envelope with the university's letterhead. Lena opened it carefully. Inside, an official invitation to join the university's summer pre-law program, full scholarship, with a personal note from Professor Vance herself. "Cannot wait to witness how far you will go," it read. Lena smiled, her heart full. From being doubted to being welcomed. From fighting for a voice to standing as proof that voices like hers could transform rooms, challenge systems, and crack the ceilings others pretended didn't exist. And dear friend, if the story moved you even just a little, if you believe that talent, resilience, and heart can emerge from anywhere, please give this video a thumbs up. Drop a comment below. Tell us where you're watching from. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button to help this channel reach 1,000 subscribers. Because with your support, we'll keep bringing you more true, inspired stories like this, stories that prove sometimes it's not where you start, it's how loudly you speak.